and the all-round thrashing of all Muslims continues, juxtaposing the Jewish and Catholic religious courts with the inhumane Sharia ones that do not seem to allow the same legal redress as the former two.
But you're free to then go and do that civilly.
Yes.
Yeah, go to the mainstream cause for justice.
But Sharia law, am I right, Fiaz, bans or forbids homosexuality, cross-dressing, gambling, fornication, the consumption of pork, the consumption of alcohol.
I never dreamt that rabbinical and other religious courts allow consumption of pork, fornication, promiscuity, the very trendy glory of male and female homewrecking and adultery, the epidemic of which is everywhere in the Christian world, not just in Britain, so that they fit in with the precepts of the imposed degeneracy of a civilized society that some are portraying as British values.
I struggle to understand how you can have a sort of separate sort of religious legal framework which seems to be, frankly, in direct opposition to the English/British rule of law.
What law? Don't you understand that your words really violate all of us victims who know that there is no law? You know that there is no law in family courts. At least no law they abide by. No genuine complaints procedures, and the whistleblowers are sacked. You know that.
Somehow working in tandem. I can't understand how that's meant to work in practice.
This is my standing and my view. If anyone wants to run a religious council, they must be fully versatile and trained over a significant period of time about what the laws of the country are. And that means they must tell people when there is a contradiction between civil legal laws and religious traditions. They must. This should be enforced on them. So if they say, for example, Sharia law does not allow for homosexuality, but in today's country, in our laws and civil tradition, you can be who you want to be.
I got married in a church and made a lifelong and life-changing decision that my marriage was going to be monogamous, of only two people. That is what I consented to. Yet that right was immediately taken away from me, not only by my abuser, but by the judges who virtually told me to shut up, as his womanizing and conning me into something I never consented to was normal. Where are my rights and the rights of the men and women in the same situation? I carried and gave birth to a child with the expectation that the child would live with me and his father in a matrimony, never dreaming that I was being conned into a polyamory and incessant promiscuity on his side. I had no right to justice and protection, yet he had the right to abuse me and enforce his filth upon me, just because immoral people in power share his values. The same with many, many other thousands and thousands of victims. Having not been allowed to do anything for years because my husband didn't allow me to, as his words, when an intelligent man and not a moron is divorcing his wife, the wife has to go on the street and on the dole, regardless of how much money the man has. Then most of my money was stolen in court itself.
But the government's concerned they may be discriminating against women. It's now investigating whether Sharia law is being misused.
Even from those that are considered quite good, women have come to us with negative stories, and some of these are very vulnerable women, and they should be treated with respect, not treated as second-class citizens.
You mean like I was treated?
We've been given rare access to one council to get an insight into how they work, and spoken to the women who use them. And some councils have been fiercely criticised for the way they treat women seeking their help.
When I told him about the rapes, he said that polygamy was allowed.
Well, conning a man or a woman into a marriage they would never consent to otherwise, adulterous marriage, with the lovers hidden in the background that many women and men do today, is tantamount to serious sexual assault, a form of rape, serial rape, and human trafficking, as they distort your purpose in a relationship and your consent, take away your bodily autonomy to suit their perverted needs. How is conning someone into polygamy any different? Both are evil. Also, if judges treat their spouses and children with this level of domestic abuse, disrespect, and selfishness, are we surprised they torture abused mothers and children into oblivion, encourage perjury on an industrial scale per case, and relegate devoted fathers, just like the Mother's Day re-abuse, to voiceless entities stripped of the right to informed, life-changing decisions?
Concerned about the way Sharia council sometimes treat women, purely because of the cases that we get on the helpline, and they come in regularly.
At this helpline for Muslim women, a large number of the calls are about divorce.
Women have come to us with negative stories.
Well, abused mothers and campaigning professionals and charities like Women's Aid and the likes have been going to the adequate top judges and politicians with their chilling stories for decades, yet a long series of baronesses, females in power, who we believe all know about the crimes too well, have still been extremely eager to accompany the current Family Court Division President, McFarlane, and even the top media lawyer, Joshua Rosenberg, on allegedly fundraising online Zoom conferences for a prominent fathers' rights group. While fathers' rights groups are known to be mainly led by many abusers and appalling fathers who campaign that their conduct that abuse their families, often their pregnant wives, and destroyed the childhoods of their children, continue to be treated as normal and voided in court so that they face no consequences for their actions, but are on the par with the devoted mothers of their children and equal to good family-orientated fathers, so that they don't pay up to their victims. It is typical for abusers, not good hands-on fathers who are truly victims of selfish, manipulative, cheating, conniving women who use their children as pawns against the great dads of their children. Those are two clans of men at two diametrically opposed sides of the fatherhood spectrum, yet the top judges deliberately destroy all the demarcation between them to encourage abusers and cheaters to keep on destroying lives without any deterrence. Well, the current Family Court president has apparently not only ignored us mothers, but also the professional campaigners and Women's Aid. According to some, has never replied to their calls to be given a voice, alongside the fathers, but has unilaterally joined fathers' rights groups and raised funds for them, which is a shocking conflict of interest and bias that shouts that women are not to be heard as women are inanimates and subordinates to even the most abusive of men. That is the feeling that we get from his professional behavior. Joshua Rosenberg has also ignored us for many, many years and apparently raised funds for that fathers' rights group, alongside the baronesses who prance about the Zoom conferences that exclude women, battered, abused women, the baronesses proud of being powerful females. Only recently, as to my knowledge, as I may be wrong, after decades of silence, Baroness Kennedy, Cherie Blair, Baroness Hale, who supervised family courts for almost a decade and is hugely liable for the atrocities, and Joshua Rosenberg, having endorsed the hugely publicized book by barrister Charlotte Proudman on this issue, whose choice to include them after their deafening silence for many, many, many years baffles many and leaves a very bitter taste in the mouths of many of the victims.
Yeah. Well, I think if I went to the English court, he would say, where is their right to decide about my life? So
yeah, you can ask me about it.
Now he can't say anything because their decision has been made on Sharia rules, and we all believe on that.
There's a lot of women who come here are in really quite bad situations.
I applied to a Sharia council for divorce after suffering domestic violence, and I was told that I needed to attend the council with my husband. I told them I couldn't. I was in danger. There were injunctions stopping him going anywhere near me, but despite my protests, the Sharia Council arranged some mediation for us.
Exactly the narrative that family courts are replete with.
Do you think the government is going to be able to change anything?
I'm not sure if the review will lead to anything, because at the end of the day, I'm guessing they will come up with some examples of good practice, highlight some of the bad practice.
Stoppable in Europe.
Stoning for adultery, cutting off hands for stealing, death for renouncing Islam. This group of men is trying to enforce Sharia law in the UK. They've started a campaign to make certain areas of London and other cities Islamic law-controlled zones, starting with Walthamstow, East London.
Muslims will be commanding good and forbidding evil, presenting Islam as an alternative to the Muslim and the non-Muslim community. Ultimately, we believe that Muslims can live together, trade according to the Sharia, resolve their problems according to the Sharia, and even police themselves to a large extent. Hopefully one day to have Islamic Emirates, which will have authority locally, security locally, and even provide welfare locally.
Chowdhury and his friends are fly-posting parts of London with large Muslim populations. They want to ban drinking, gambling and playing music. And they say they've got bands of young men ready to patrol and enforce Sharia law by any means.
Now, that enforcement will not initially be on the level of inviting and forbidding verbally. But if someone has the capability to forbid what in essentially is something evil, like pornography or prostitution, he should do so.
I'm not sure if this is an authentic BBC video or something else masquerading as one. It should be checked. But if even partially true, any extreme barbaric hegemony like this anywhere within Britain and the imposition of their draconian rules should always be prohibited. But as for the hand-cutting, stoning and similar savagery, us abused mothers whose young children were taken away from us and dumped on strangers to bring them up, making them so ill with depression that they could hardly stand on their little feet, while their fathers laughed aloud, like in my case, the images of which will forever haunt me. Or the mothers who have even had all contact with their children banned, so that the fathers' lovers could bring them up. What was done to us equates to the here cited brutalities. It was like being stoned, or rather gang rape, with the same being done to my young child nearby, and me not being able to do anything to protect us, as our hands were tied at the back. In my eyes, the most extreme forms of these Sharia laws are akin to what we've experienced in Western family courts in millions for the last 60 or so years. Pretty much the same caliber of men and women operate in those courts or are in charge of them. Sick minds.
And they hold immense influence over some Muslims in the UK who go to these councils for rulings on marriages and family matters and things like this. They treat them like they were a court, making adjudications on Islamic law, Sharia law. Joining me now to discuss this in more detail, Credlin regular and author Ayan Hirsi Ali. I think most people in Australia would be shocked to hear of the fact that there are at least 85 Sharia councils in operation. It's almost unfathomable here.
The practice of Sharia legal, legal practices were happening in Britain illegally. So, for instance, people would discover that something like this was happening with husbands presenting with multiple wives.
You mean like so many in the West do, while being maritally promiscuous from the start of their marriage, against the wishes of their catfished victims? The only difference being that those are not marriages, yet it is rewarded in courts as a virtue. And marriage officiated in a church and that produces children is only a day party and not binding for the victim at all. You're just a piece of meat, an incubator.
And this continued, and for a long time there was this debate, what should we do about it? Unfortunately, the Muslim communities that now form parallel communities within Britain decided to go ahead and implement these Sharia laws. And so when you say it is informal, that's true, but it has legal consequences for women and children, because primarily what they have been adjudicating is marriage, divorce, custody, and inheritance. And in all of these areas, women are completely, I would say, they don't have the same rights that they are granted in the national law.
What law? This lady, I believe, to whom I've written a couple of times, has never replied to me. And I've always delineated in detail the atrocities happening in Western family courts. She knows that.
And this has been a shameful silence of feminists.
Feminists have always ignored our plights for help. Even at the beginning of my campaign, 22 years ago, I wrote to a group of them, about 3,500 of them, and they normally exchanged posts and comments on women's rights and how a woman should not cook or whatever at home. Yet when I wrote to them about this, not a single one commented. Feminists do not seem to have any interest in family life, marriage, children, and some even seem to enjoy the abuse of abused mothers and children in family courts, like the females abusing their power over battered mothers and children and laughing about it in courts themselves. The capacity of women to abuse other women is grossly underrated.
So how does this work? How does a quasi-court actually have the power to do any of this under religious law?
The women who are taken there, they feel that the laws and the adjudication in these courts is legally binding for them. It is a blatant violation of the national laws.
This statement is a violation of my mental health, intelligence, if I have any, and dignity.
This is what the Islamist groups want. They want a parallel society. It's insidious. It's by, Sharia by stealth. It's an Islamization of their surroundings. But I think the real blame lies with the British government, because it is the British government that has allowed this to happen.
But you also know that they allow the same to happen in Western family courts as well.
My advice to the Australian government is to pass a law right now saying only Australian laws apply in Australia, and they apply uniformly to everyone.
Are we talking about the same Australia where, again, many suicides by abused mothers without custody have taken place, including a mom a couple of years ago who hung herself in a woods near her home, according to some Australian moms on the support groups?
And I think I would also urge feminists in Australia to stand up for the rights of girls, Muslim girls and Muslim women, because we always know, and I've seen this in Europe, first it is the Muslim girls and women, and then it is other women. I would advise the Australian government, before they are put in a situation where they have to formalize a violation of Australian laws, to pass a law and to criminalize Sharia or any other foreign law.
Family law issues such as divorce and wills.
Sharia courts have no legal jurisdiction and are unregulated. So just who are these judges running them, and are they operating within the law? Sarah went through a Sharia court process with her ex-husband to discuss custody arrangements of her children. She says she presented official court documents proving her former husband had been criminally convicted of harassing her and beating her child, but this was ignored by the Sharia judge.
I was in tears. I felt denigrated. I felt belittled.
Well, just like I felt when the courts ignored two letters from our two GPs, one from Scotland and the other from England, from the social services, from my husband's company, from their lawyers, from the police, about his abuse of me and pathological lying, and none of those were ever mentioned, not even once. But I was told to stop procuring any evidence or I may never see my child again.
What advice would you give to a sister that wants to marry a Shia brother?
You can pause and read this horror if you like.
There are questions about the power these judges can wield,
which is diminutive compared to the power the mainstream tyrants wield.
Has found that many Muslim women in the UK are struggling under Islamic law and Sharia council. These Sharia councils take away the autonomy of women.
That the Department for Work and Pensions was actively promoting a Sharia law administrator. Now, the last time I checked, we had the English and Welsh legal system in this country, which is based primarily on common law. And then we had the UK Parliament, which is supreme, which creates law through legislation in this country through a democratically elected chamber.
What planet does this man inhabit? Grimm's fairy tales?
So why the hell do we have a quasi-legal framework, irrespective of which religious group it comes from, making decisions on British soil?
Okay, so the indigenous Brits should be in charge of their court of law. The same for all, with the only determinant being the rule of law and not any whimsical abuse of power.
To me, this is outrageous. It is an attack not only on our values, but on our culture, and I think it's got to stop. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I think it's very clear now, we must ban Sharia law in all forms throughout all their councils, but let me know your thoughts below.
Stir up the hatred a bit more without disclosing the atrocities of the mainstream courts that have pushed thousands into suicide.
You want to live in the West if you want to live under Sharia law.
You score to about 10. Stop worshipping a pedo warlord who was the bunny blue of the 7th century, sleeping with African sex slaves.
Ooh. Eating bacon in the morning reduces your chance of marrying a 6-year-old by 98%. There are 50 Muslim countries around the world. Why the fuck would you move to the West if you want to live under Sharia law?
Well, I have seen chilling videos of Muslim psychopaths living in the West who do not have better things to do in their insipid lives but to plot how to conquer the countries they now live in, screaming on megaphones how the West will be Muslim. I'm certain those are the kind of extremists with dangerous psychopathology, the likes of whom exist in every single creed, and nothing attests to that more than the current world events. Just turn on the TV. A patchwork of sickness. Ironically, those who are masters of greed, deceit, and fanatical thirst for occupying others seem to be generally the loudest at pinpointing the same done by fellow kindred spirits, just in a fallaciously generalizing way they utilize to pull the wool over the eyes of the unsuspecting masses who are extremely good at AI, unbelievably, whom they need to take advantage of for their own sick, covert agenda before they discard them like some brainless detritus, all for the needs of their own pathology.